Start the recordings. Erev Tov L'Kulam. Welcome to join us for our third shiur in the series, studying Hilchot Shemitah. And this is meant to be very practical. The goal here is to focus on what you have to do for the coming year, and also to learn some basics and fundamentals, to gain knowledge at the same time, so that you can start to understand the lingo, the different terms, so that as they come up throughout the year, you're gonna know what you're talking about. And by the time we get to the end of Shemitah, we'll really know what we're doing, and you'll be ready for the next Shemitah 7 years from now. So that's the goal, to learn as much as we can, and also know how to deal with the practical ramifications of this Shemitah year. So I'm going to open up the PowerPoint here, and open up my screen. 1 second. Okay. Share screen. Video clip. Okay. Good. Can everybody see this PowerPoint? Okay. I hope everybody can see this. Okay, it's coming up right now. Just loading. Yafa. Shemitah in the kitchen and the marketplace overview. We're going to try to do the best that we can to get through a number of key concepts. I'm sure there will be many things that we don't cover. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. So last time we spoke about working in your garden. Shemitah is something that applies to many different spaces in our lives. It applies to the garden, it applies to the kitchen, it applies to the marketplace. And the last 2 weeks, we spent time focusing specifically on Shemitah in the garden. What are you allowed to plant? Can you fertilize? Can you irrigate? Can you weed? These are all the things that we spoke about. I just want to very quickly, we'll run through this. Planting and sowing are forbidden during Shemitah. We've already entered a period when planting is problematic. This is called Tosefet Shemitah. Even though Shemitah has not started, the Shemitah year starts on Aleph Tishrei. We already have Tosefet Shemitah from the beginning of this month of Aleph Elul. Watering is permitted during Shemitah, but only the amount necessary for proper maintenance of the vegetation. Fertilization, you have to do this before Shemitah. You should use slow release fertilizers. Weeding is permitted under certain circumstances, if it's causing the death of your other plants, but otherwise it should be refrained. One should refrain from weeding. Pruning bushes and hedges, you could prune to, if you have to make more space to be able to walk through your garden, but to improve the growth of the field or your hedges, that is prohibited mostly. Along with shaping and pruning trees, mowing the grass. You can mow your grass as you normally would, but the problem is causing things to grow. That's generally the problem during the Shemitah year. Other things that you can do that you shouldn't be doing are hoeing the ground and smoothing out the dirt, harisha, uzriya. These are all the different prohibitions, and you can listen to the previous 2 shiurim to get a full analysis of each of these things. But now we're going to move on to the kitchen. And with regards to the kitchen in Shemitah, we're going to deal with the quality of the food. Okay. Now, what happens is that if food grows, if vegetables or wheat or trees, fruit and vegetables grow during the Shemitah year, they have a very special status. It's called Keduchat Feed. It's holy food. Now, we have a few questions about Keduchat Feed. Number one, is there a mitzvah to eat Keduchat Feed? Should I try to go to restaurants or that have Keduchat Feed? Should I buy produce that specifically has Keduchat Feed? If I have an apple that grows in my garden during Shemitah, is that a good thing to go and eat that? Or maybe I should stay away from eating this produce. That's number one. Number two, who owns the fruit? There's this notion called hefker and the mitzvah of hashmatat shvi'it. Who owns the fruit? There's this notion of making everything ownerless. So the owner, how does this work exactly? Question number 3, may I pick fruit from my own garden? Is this permitted? There's generally a problem with harvesting and with gathering fruit. Am I allowed to eat any fruit from my own garden? Question number 4, which specific fruits and veggies have the status of Keduchat Feed? We'll see that some do and some don't. And do I need to treat Keduchat Feed fruit differently than other fruit? So now it's important to understand So these are the questions that we're going to try to address tonight for the first part. We're then going to get into the part two. It's important to understand where you might encounter Keduchat Feed. There are three different situations in which you might encounter Keduchat Feed. Let's start with number two. Number two, from your own garden, or you're from your neighbor's garden. If there's produce that's grown during the Shemitah year, that has Keduchat Feed. So if you pick an apple from your tree and you want to eat it, and we'll talk about whether you're allowed to do that or not, that has Keduchat Feed. That's the one way that you will encounter produce that has Keduchat Feed. The second thing, which is number one here, is Otsar Beit Din products. Otsar Beit Din products is something that we're going to talk about closer to the end of this year. But if you use a particular system called Otsar Beit Din, and you buy produce through the Otsar Beit Din system, that produce retains its Keduchat Feed, and you are eating holy food. And then the third example is something called Heter Mechira. Heter Mechira we're also going to deal with closer to the end of the shiur. Heter Mechira is, in one sentence, is when Jewish farmers sell their fields to non-Jews, okay? And in certain situations, the Jews are actually still working the field. In certain situations, non-Jews are working the fields. And this is a big machloket, whether Heter Mechira is permitted or not. According to Rav Kook, one should be machmir, one should be stringent and treat Heter Mechira produce as if it has Keduchat Feed. This, in fact, is the psak of the city of Bnei Brak, the city of the Chazon Ish. And this is what Rav Kook recommended people do with their Heter Mechira produce. And we will speak more about each of these different things. But I just want you to understand where you might encounter Keduchat Feed. So let's move on to the next piece. Is it a mitzvah to eat Keduchat Feed? This is the first question that we had earlier. And we're going to go through another few slides. We'll take a break. If you have any questions, we'll take time for questions. So is it a mitzvah to eat Keduchat Feed? So there's a famous position of the Ramban, Nachmanides, in his commentary to the Rambam's Sefer HaMitzvot, the Hasagot HaRamban. And the Ramban says as follows: in the mitzvot that he feels the Rambam left out from counting in the 613 mitzvot, mitzvah shlishit, she'amra Torah beperot shvi'it, v'haita Shabbat ha'aretz lachem le'ochla. Ramban is quoting a pasuk from Parshat Behar, and it says, the land should rest, and it will be for you to eat. V'darshu, and the rabbis darshaned from this, le'ochla v'lo l'schora. This is meant specifically for eating and not for business, for merchandise. You can't sell the produce of Keduchat Feed, but you're allowed to eat it. In fact, the Ramban is suggesting here, this is a mitzvah. It is a mitzvah to eat Keduchat Feed. Wow. Every time you eat from the holy produce of Eretz Yisrael, you are eating Keduchat Feed. And this is how the Megillat Esther, a certain commentator on the Ramban, understands the Ramban. That the Ramban, Nachmanides, believes it's a mitzvah to eat Keduchat Feed, whereas the Rambam, Maimonides, who does not enumerate this, does not believe that it is a mitzvah to eat Keduchat Feed. But of course, this is not the end of the story. The Sri de Eish, for example, Rav Yaakov Yechiel Weinberg, in the 20th century, argues that the Ramban doesn't believe it's a mitzvah to eat Keduchat Feed. He's just telling you that you can't sell the produce. I can't take apples and start selling them. I can't take bananas and sell them. It doesn't mean you have to eat them. You just can't sell them. So you're probably likely going to eat it yourself because you're not selling it, but it's not a mitzvah, dafka, to eat them. Now, so in the end, okay, and Rav Kook argues that Meikar Hadin, the Ramban actually is probably wrong, that there is no mitzvah to eat Keduchat Feed, but it's recommended. It's a good thing. And this is all based on the Ramban. Now, we do get a little bit of insight, and I thought this is such a beautiful little machloka that I'm going to show you here from Al HaMechya. We gloss over Al HaMechya and we rush through it. And if you just think through the words, there's such beautiful words. And in fact, there's a machloket about the formulation of Al HaMechya. Al HaMechya is said when we eat a few different products. Number one, if we have grape juice, then it's Al HaGefen Val Pri HaGefen. Or if we have fruit from the Shivat Haminim, Al HaEitz Val Pri HaEitz, dates and pomegranates. If we have cookies, mizonot. And then also if we have again, these are no products. So those are the 3 times when we say al hamichya. And it goes like this: Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, al hamichya v'hakakala, etc. V'al tunavat hasadeh. Thank you, Hashem, for the produce, for the food that we just ate. But then we enlarge our thanks. We enlarge our hoda'at to Hashem, and we say, thank you for this beautiful Eretz Chamda Tova Rechava, this wide, open space land. Sheratzita, v'hinchalta la'avotenu, that you desired and wanted us to inherit this land. Why? Le'echol mipirya v'lisboa mituva, to eat of its fruit and to be satiated from its goodness. So this is a very interesting line. And then we go on to ask Hashem for things. Rachem Hashem and Hashem have mercy on Yerushalayim and Sion and the Mizbeach, etc., etc. And let us go to Yerushalayim. Now this line, I mean, did we come to Eretz Yisrael just to eat the fruit? I know some people like the restaurants here. They like the coffee shops. They like Cafe Afuch here and and Good Jerusalem Cafe. But is this why we came to Eretz Yisrael? So look what the tour writes in his Orach Chaim, his commentary to Orach Chaim, Siman Reish Chet. He says, "V'katav od v'yesh omrim, v'nolchal mipirya v'yispam mituva, ve'ein le'omro." You shouldn't say this. Delete it. Cross it out from al mechya. She'ein lachmod haaretz b'shvil pirya v'tova, el lekayem mitzvot hatzliot ba. You shouldn't desire to come to Eretz Yisrael because you can get everything in the stores today, and they have all the deodorant products, and they have IKEA and Zara's and the best coffee shops, and that you could buy and all this and that, and you go to the shuk. It's not about the materialism. It's not about the consumption. It's not about the malls and the shopping. Chas v'shalom. We come here to Eretz Yisrael to perform the mitzvot. That's why we want to be here. It's not about eating from the produce. It's not about enjoying the fruits of the land. It's about, and therefore, the Torah says we have to take this line out. Take le'achol mibriyam v'yispam out from al mechya. Now the Bach, Rav Yoel Circus, in his comment on the Torah, argues on the Torah. And he says, "V'katavod v'yesh omrim v'nochal mibriyam v'yispam ve'ein lo." There are those who say you shouldn't say this. He's quoting the Torah. Tema. I'm shocked by this. Halo Keduchat Haaretz Hanishpat Ma Mikudeshet Haaretz Mikdushat Haaretz Ha'elyona Hi Nishpat Gam Beperotea Sheonkim Mikdushat Hashchina Hashochenet B'Karev Haaretz. He says, why? How can the Torah say this? We know that the special holiness of the land even exists within the fruit itself. It embodies the fruit. It's good that it says this. We're connecting to the Shekhinah. We're touching the presence of Hashem when we eat the fruit. Now, the truth is this machloket is true of all the fruits of Eretz Yisrael, but all the more so the fruit that has Keduchat Feed. So this is just another, insight that connects to this machloket. And our general hashkafa is that one should try to eat Keduchat Feed. One should eat as much of it as they can, and it's always healthy to eat more vegetables and fruits as it is. So it's a good thing. But this is definitely within, this insight about al mechya. It definitely is within the spirit of the Ramban and Rav Kook. I'm going to pause for 1 second here. Does anybody have any questions or comments at this point? Feel free to speak up if you have any questions or comments. Okay, is everybody with me? Just thumbs up that you're with me. That good. If I'm going too fast, feel free to write in, ask me to just slow down a little bit. No problem. Okay, I'm going to share the screen again. Okay, and I'm going to share it. I'm going to put it back into presentation mode so that it's a full screen. Okay, good. So, now we saw. Okay, so we've answered. If we just go back to that first slide, is there a mitzvah to eat Keduchat Feed? We've just answered that question. Now we get to the next question of who owns the fruit. Okay, now there's a mitzvah. There's a mitzvah called, which is in Mishmot Perek Kaf Gimel, and it says as follows: "V'hashvi'it tishmitena unitashta." We relinquish ownership of the land, and who could then therefore eat the land? V'achlu edyonei amcha, and anybody could eat the land, eat the fruit. It means that the fruit is available to anybody, especially people who are in need of it. Okay, evyonim, people who are impoverished. Vitram, and whatever's extra, the leftovers, tochal chayat hasadeh, even the animals will eat it. V'kein ta'aseh lekarmecha u'lezaytacha. This is what you should do for your kerem, your vineyard, and for your olive grove. So there is this mitzvah to do hefker, to make the produce in our fields ownerless. And it's not just true about the vineyard and the olive grove. It's true of all of the fruit that we have growing in our gardens. Okay, so this does not apply to the if something is growing in your home. Okay, that's different. If something's growing outside, okay, then as it says explicitly here, hasadeh. Okay, then it becomes ownerless. Now, does that mean that as we enter the Shemitah year, that we need to go through a tekes? Before we burn our chametz, we go around, we collect the chametz, we do b'tikach chametz, and then we say kol chamir v'chamia diga b'yirshuti. We do hefker. We say it's ownerless. Have a hefker ka'afra de'ara. Do we need to do the same thing before Shnat Hashmitah? So how does hefker work? And here we have a machloket that is quoted by the Minchat Chinuch. The Minchat Chinuch is a commentary on the Sefer HaChinuch. The Sefer HaChinuch, interestingly, was written by a father for his son in honor of his bar mitzvah, and it enumerates the 613 mitzvot. And the Minchat Chinuch is a commentary on the Sefer HaChinuch. And this Minchat Chinuch has this analytical question. He says, "V'ani mesupak, I ha-mitzvah akar kafta degavrahu, d'rachman hatzivao lehafkir perotav b'shvi'it, u'mechuyav lekayem lehafkir, v'im mafkir harei ze hefker, aval eino mafkir eino mufkar." He says, wait a second, who has to create this process of hefker? Is it on the person's head, meaning is it our individual responsibility to mafkir, to relinquish the ownership of all of our fruit? And if we don't do it, it means we're violating a mitzvah taseh. We're not fulfilling a mitzvah taseh. And this is the key point, the nafkamina, if I don't mafkir my field, it means that, that it means that you or me, if we're not mafkir the field, we could be eating produce that was not let go, that was not relinquished, okay, which could be a problem. Okay, maybe you're taking from that person. It's possible then that trumot umasrot would need to be taken. Just let me explain there. During the 6 years of the Shemitah cycle, the first 6 years, we have to take tithes, trumot umasrot. During the 7th year, we do not need to take trumot umasrot. But if a person holds on to something and doesn't do hefker based on this, then that produce requires trumot umasrot. So if I go to my neighbor's field and I start eating an apple and I say, "Oh, this is wonderful! Everyone's eating. We're having a party here. It's we've given up control of our food, and I'm just eating as a neighbor." But they haven't done hefker. That could be a problem. Okay, if the responsibility is on the individual, or he says the other option, which I didn't bring down here, is that hefker happens automatically. Okay, it's Afkata de Malka, it's called, the king, Melech, okay, Hashem, Ribono Shel Olam is the one who is mafkir this automatically. Now, how do we paskin? The truth is that we paskin that you don't need to recite a specific formulation of hefker. The Pinei Halacha writes, as Rabbi Eliezer Melamed, Ein sarich shabal hasadeh yodia shapirot shegadu b'hasadeh ohem hefker. You don't need to, do this whole ritual and say, this is hefker. The Torah automatically causes them to be hefker. The Kol Adam Rashai, again, we're going to talk about whether, what this translates into. The next question is, well, if everything's hefker and all the fruit belongs to everybody, okay, they're collectively owned, does that mean that strangers can take fruit from your garden? Can someone walk into someone else's garden and take the fruit? Okay, so this is normally you may not. It's stealing if you take fruit from somebody else's garden. I actually saw an interesting tshuva by Rav Moshe Feinstein this week. What happens if they're during a regular year, not during Shemitah? What if there are trees growing into your garden and it's bothersome to you and you want to cut it and there are fruit on that tree? Are you allowed to take from that fruit? Rav Moshe says you're allowed to cut off the branches that are in your reshut. You may not take the fruit. The fruit still belongs to your neighbor. You can't just take something from your neighbor or from anyone else for that matter, even if it's hanging over into another area or into your domain. So what about during Shemitah? Does that mean anyone could walk into our gardens? I mean, should we, are you allowed to have a guard dog? Are you allowed to lock your garden if this is the case? So here we have an interesting machloket between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. Okay, and this sort of fits in with their personalities. This is Mishnah Masachet Shvi'it Perek Dalet. Beit Shammai omrim, ein ochlin perot shvi'it b'tova. Beit Hillel omrim, ochlin b'tova v'shelo b'tova. So Beit Shammai says that you're allowed to eat the perot shvi'it because it's hefker. Anyone could take from anybody else, but you can't do it b'tova. What does that mean b'tova? Okay, Rav Vadim Ibertanar explains the asur the ein machzikin tova lebalim derachmana afkarinu. You're not allowed to say thank you to your neighbors or to wherever you're taking the fruit from. You just take it. You're not allowed to say thank you because it's not theirs. They don't own it. They've given up control of it. As we said, Rahman Afkarina, the Torah made it hefker. Whereas Beit Hillel says, Beit Hillel says you can eat, and give thanks if you want to. Okay, you can say thank you, even though it technically doesn't belong to the person that you took it from. And now the Rambam tells us that if a person, this is in Hilchot Shemitah V'Yovel Perek Daled Halacha Kav Daled, mitzvat aseh lashmit kol ma shetotzia aretz b'shvi'it, you have to do hashmata, you have to mafkir everything that grows from the land, as it says v'hashvi'it tishbatenu v'tashta v'chol hanoel karmo osad v'sadeu b'shvi'it v'tal mitzvat aseh. If you close your garden, if you lock that door, okay, and lock the gate, that is a violation of the mitzvat aseh. Okay, you need to make it accessible for people. And then he quotes also in Hilchot Shemitah V'Yovel Perek Vav Halachat Vav, Ochlin Perot Shvi'it b'tova v'shelo b'tova. So who is he paskening like? Is the Rambam following Beit Hillel or Beit Shammai? He's following clearly Beit Hillel. B'tova. Okay, so how does this work? She'iten lo perot shvi'it kemo she'asa imo tova shenatan lo, o she'achnisu l'genato v'achol kemo she'asa lo tova. Okay, it's you do it in reciprocity. You do it. You thank them for doing it. You say, "Here, come and take some fruit." These are all examples of bitova. Even though the person technically doesn't own it, you can still thank them for the food, and you can still acknowledge that they're giving it to you. Okay, so this is the answer is that technically a person can enter your field. However, we have Rav Kook. This is Rav Kook from Shabbat Haaretz. I actually have the Sefer right here, Shabbat Haaretz. Okay, Rav Kook's books are all white. Okay, it's called Shas Lavan. Okay, and Shabbat Haaretz, he wrote this in 1909, when he was dealing very extensively with Shemitah. The whole book is about Shemitah. Okay, now what does he say about this? He says as follows: V'yishomrim she'ein ochlin perot shvi'it ela birshut bal habayit. Hey, listen, there are those who say that you're not allowed to, even though everything's hefker and technically everyone knows everything, you could only eat in your own home. And even though technically you should be able to eat there, gather gadu chachamim. Rav Kook says, you know what's going to happen? You're going to go into your friend's field and take fruit, and then you're going to do it the next year too, and that's stealing. So in order not to habituate yourself to taking from other people, we don't take even in the Shemitah year. Now the truth is the owner is not allowed to stop anyone from taking. Nonetheless, Rav Kook says, listen, the Balabait has to let you in, but even though he has to let you in, it's still the right thing to do to ask permission to go into the field. And this is how we paskin. A person should not just walk into someone else's garden unless you've been given permission and they know you're doing it. You shouldn't just walk in and take anything you want. one thing that you can do that's beautiful is to put up a sign and say, hey, anyone come and take fruit from my garden. I would love for you to enjoy the fruit of this the Shemitah year. That is something you can do if you feel comfortable and you feel safe doing that. But Rav Kook says in our day and age, and there are those who say it could even be a chilul Hashem if you're taking without permission. But in our day and age, it's important to to ask or to notify the person. Okay. Now, an interesting sort of ramification of this machloket of the Minchat Chinuch has to do with fruits of non-Jews. Okay, let's say you have fruit that's coming from an Arab field. Now, we assume this Arab didn't do hefker. So if you go back to the discussion of the Minchat Chinuch, whether you have to actively do hefker or whether it happens automatically. So if they have to do hefker, we assume they didn't do hefker. If it happens automatically, so then their fields are also, the fruit is also considered ownerless. So here we have a famous machloket between two different personalities. One is between Rav Yosef, Rav Moshe de Tirani, and the Rav Yosef Karo, okay, number 1 and 2 here, who both lived in Sfat in the 16th century, and they very heavily debated Shemitah issues. Rav Yosef Karo, author of the Beit Yosef, actually put the Mabit, okay, he wrote a sefer called the Mabit, into Chayrim because he didn't follow what the consensus was in his day. And one area where they argue, and there are other areas as well, which we'll talk about, is the Mabit says that he assumes, listen, even if the produce that belongs to Arabs or to non-Jews, whatever it is, we assume it's also made hefker. Okay, it's made hefker, and therefore it's ownerless, and therefore you don't need to take trumot or masrot. Whereas the Beit Yosef seems to suggest that the individual needs to do mafkir, okay, needs to do hefker, make it ownerless. Otherwise, the produce is chayav in trumot u masrot. Okay, the Chazon Ish paskins, out of Safek, that one should take trumot u masrot. We'll talk more about this in a little bit later. Okay, now, so we if everything is ownerless, okay, and I don't own anything and you don't own anything, am I allowed to take things from my own garden? Can I harvest from my own garden? I'm just going to pause for 1 second. Any questions or comments at this point in time? Okay, if anybody has a comment or thought or questions, feel free to speak up. Okay, so now we go back to, if it belongs to anyone, am I allowed to gather things from my own field? In fact, one of the prohibitions regarding gardening, it says explicitly in Vayikra Parakafei, Uvashana Shvit Shabbat Shabbaton Yalatz Shabbat Lashem Satacha Lo Tizra V'Chamacha Lo Tizmor. Okay, so first of all, you can't seed and you can't prune. But then it says Eit Sefiach Kitzircha Lo Tiksor. Don't harvest from your field. Vet in vain Iziracha Lo Tivsor. And also, don't gather in grapes from your vineyard. Shnat Shabbaton Hiya La'aretz. Now, it's saying here that you can't harvest from your field and you can't gather grapes. There are many things missing. Does this include clementinot? Does this include, cucumbers and tomatoes and all these other vegetables? So, based on Midrashim of Chazal, we assume that Inven Izirecha includes all fruit, that Safiach Kitzircha includes all produce and kidneyot and vegetables, all of these things. So it would appear that I am not allowed to gather anything from my own field. Okay. However, the truth is otherwise. Okay. There are exceptions, and there is a way for me to gather from my own field or my own garden, but with under certain conditions. Let's talk about what those conditions are. We see here in Mishnah Masachet Shvi'it, Perek Chet, Mishnah Vav. It says as follows: Te'enim shel Shvi'it, figs that grow on the Shemitah year. Ein kotzin otam b'muksa, aval kotze otam b'cherava. You can't cut them with a muksa, but you can cut them with a cherava. What are these two things? Rabbi Bertoner explains. The muksa, kli hamiyuchad lakutz bo te'enim kari muksa. I cannot cut figs with a normal kli, another normal vessel that I use to cut things. But I can use a charava, which is a sakin, a knife. So I can cut things in an abnormal way, but not in the usual way. The Tama Mishum Dichtiv, the reason is because it says in Vayikra Kafei that in Ven Yisrael Lo Tivzor Kiderech Habotzrim. I may not gather or harvest in the way that is normally done in an industrial manner, in a really sort of efficient manner. I can't do it in the normal manner, but I could do it in an abnormal manner. So this is one opinion about how one can, what one needs to do to create a shinui, to create a change. Okay. Now the Rambam brings up the notion of a different shinui. The Rambam says in Hilchot Shemitah V'Yovel Perek Daled Achal Kaf Daled, and he says as follows. We read the first part here. Look on the underlined words. V'chein imasaf kol perotav letoch beito. If you were to gather everything in your garden into your home, rather you should be mafkir. You should make it ownerless. V'yad hakol shavin. Anyone could come and take it. B'kol makom shneamar v'achlu av yonei amcha. And the Rambam says, listen, you know how you create a shinui? You can gather and you can harvest, but just take less. Take a little bit. Everyone has a little bit. Everyone takes a little bit. And he gives examples. You could take some, but don't take all. Don't take the majority. Take a little bit. That's how you create a shinui. So two different models of a shinui. That the physical picking of or harvesting or gathering is done in an unusual manner with a shinui, or that you're picking less produce. Now, halacha l'maaseh tachlis. What do we say about this? We have actually a machloket here. There are differences of opinion between two modern day poskim. Rav Rimon, he says one should be machmir for both types of shinuim, meaning gather in a different manner and also gather less. But it says we follow the Rambam. One can gather the amount of food that normally you bring to your home for a few days or weeks. Bring a little bit of fruit. Don't bring huge amounts. Don't bring cartloads. Don't bring whole huge baskets. But you could bring a little bit, and you could definitely gather from your own field. But you shouldn't gather too much. Okay. Now, interesting question. Why does a shinui make a difference? It says explicitly that I'm not allowed to gather or harvest. So if I do it with a shinui, why should that change things? And the answer is based on the Rambam Sefer HaMitzvot, Mitzvah Lamed Lo Ta'aseh Reish Kaf Bet, that by doing it with the shinui, you're demonstrating that you're not the owner. Because you don't pick and you don't gather and you don't harvest in the way that you normally would. This is all mine. No, you dafka, you do it in a way that shows that it's hefker, that it doesn't belong to you. So you take a little bit. When you I'll give you an example. Okay. You're at a buffet, okay? You're eating at a buffet at someone's house. You don't take everything. You take a little bit, you fill up your plate. It's not yours to take. It's not your food. It belongs to the balabayit. You take a little bit, you can have a plate, but don't take everything, okay? And all eat, a buffet that you eat as much as you want. You could eat more. You can take a second plate, even a third plate. You shouldn't be gathering basketfuls of, food to bring it home, etc. And this is based on the Lashon of the Rambam. Gather in the way that someone would take from hefker. You take some, but not all. And I think there's such a powerful lesson here. There's right. What did Descartes say? I think, therefore I am. In our society, I consume, therefore I am. And Shemitah is teaching us that we don't have control. We're not the ultimate owners. Kila Hashem ha'aretz, the land belongs to Hashem. And we take a little bit. We take what we need, but not more than that. There's so many powerful lessons in that we could learn from Shemitah, especially in our very materialistic world, where I was talking to my brother. We were having a conversation about Amazon when I was in the US. And everyone basically went around and said, basically they order something on Amazon every day. I mean, this is the norm. This is normal behavior. It's not unusual. And, and then you get it the next day. So we have this, where we are, very involved. Consumption is a big part of our lives. And Shemitah is about taking a step back and recognizing that we are not the ultimate owners. Okay, now I'm going to pause for 1 second. Questions, comments at this point in time? Okay, if you have any questions, feel free to speak out. Otherwise, let's continue. Now we're going to get to a little bit of a technical piece here, and that is, how do you define Shemitah produce? Okay, let me give you an example. When it comes to taxes, you have a tax year. Okay. The tax year, if I'm not mistaken, okay, someone could correct me if I'm wrong, goes from January 1st to December 31st, okay? If you give charity, after December 31st, that's part of the next year. If you have a child in that year, you get a tax benefit for that child for that whole year. But there's a cutoff point. There's January 1st to December 31st. Now in halacha, we also have cutoff points, similar, just like you have accounting. So you have different dafka, you have arba, Rosh Hashanah, you have 4, New Years in halacha. Now, the new year, for when it comes to sinning, when it comes to judgment for humankind, that's Rosh Hashanah, Aleph Tishrei. When it comes to fruit, generally the breakdown point is Tu B'Shvat, in fact. Okay. Now, when it comes to the Shemitah year, things are a little bit different. And it also different depending on the type of produce. So we have 3 categories here: fruit, vegetables, and like produce and legumes, wheat products, for example. So basically it works as follows. When it comes to fruit, okay, now fruit generally will start, okay, there's some fruit, of course, that grow throughout the year, but many fruit will, you start seeing them, bud or start growing the fruit themselves, the actual perot, I don't know. I don't know, it could be January, February, March, that's for many fruit, that's how it works. And the key marker is called Zman Chanata. Zman Chanata. Zman Chanata is we assume today that this is when the tree, and it's machloket, but when the fruit reaches 1/3 growth. Okay, and you have, there are different stages that it takes for a fruit to grow. When it reaches 1/3 growth, whatever year that is in, okay, and when it comes to the Shemitah year, again, it goes by Aleph Tishrei, the end of Elul, okay? So whenever the third, that stage of reaching 1/3 of growth happens, and which we assume to be the minimal amount of growth that makes this fruit edible, that determines whether it is a Shemitah produce or not, okay? So let me give you an example. I noticed my neighbors, they have a lemon tree, okay? And lemons, from what I understand, grow throughout the year. They have lemons on their tree right now. They also have a mango tree, okay? Now these mangoes and these lemons are clearly past a 1/3 year of growth, okay? 1/3 of their growth, okay? Are they half, 3/4, not sure, but they're definitely past 1/3. And this is now the 6th year of the Shemitah cycle. So this produce does not have Keduchat Feed because it's a 6th-year thing. But if the fruit reaches Zman Chanata within the Shemitah year of Aleph Tishrei to the end of Elul, then it has Keduchat Feed. That means that sometimes, so some fruit, look at 1b, some fruit reach this stage as early as Tu B'Shvat and arrive on the shelves by mid-year. So what's interesting, and this is a key point, when it comes to fruit that has Keduchat Feed, and let's assume we're only talking about Keduchat Feed fruit, you're not going to have anything on the shelves that has Keduchat Feed in terms of the fruit, because you need to wait till something goes through 1/3 of its growth period in the Shemitah year, and then it's brought out to the shelves, and then it's brought to production. Okay, so now that also means that there are going to be fruit that go through their 3rd, the Zman Chanata at the end of next year. It could be July next year, a mango goes through Zman Chanata, okay, that 3rd stage, that 1/3 of its stage of growth, and it only comes to the shelf in the 8th year of the Shemitah year, but it still has Keduchat Feed. So this is something that affects not just the 7th year, but even the 8th year. That's with regards to fruit. So if you have a garden, this is something you want to look out for when the fruit is growing. Now, what about vegetables? And by the way, there are charts that are put out, as we'll see, it will come out in the coming year, about exactly when you assume the stage, the season of growth for particular fruit is. Now, when it comes to vegetables are a little bit more simple. Vegetables, it's all about when you pick. Zman Likita. When you pick the vegetable, that is what determines whether something has Keduchat Feed or not. So if I pick a vegetable on the last day of Elul, that does not have Keduchat Feed. And if I pick it on Tzom Gedalia 3 days later, that has Keduchat Feed. Okay, and this includes herbs as well. It goes by Zman Likita. And therefore, with vegetables, this notion of Keduchat Feed begins earlier in the year. And the same thing, then the third thing is, produce and legumes. This is also a third of growth. Once you get to a third of growth, and this starts becoming an issue a few months into the Shemitah year. Again, just like fruit, it takes some time to pass through that period in the Shemitah year. So the first few months, you may not have any issues with fruit. We're not going to have any issues. But vegetables, we will right away. But although we'll talk about why that might, what mitigates that. But produce also, it will only be an issue a little bit later on in the year. Okay, any questions about this? Feel free to speak up. Okay, now there are some products here which do not have Keduchat Feed. Okay, there's some exceptions. 1 second, let me just go to the next slide. Okay, so for example, trees. So trees do not have branches, do not have Keduchat Feed. This we'll talk about by Alulav, by Hadassim. Herbs, which are used for tea, do have Keduchat Feed. Products used to make medicines, they have no Keduchat Feed because they're not needed by all people. And flowers. Flowers is a big discussion. I do not want to get into it right now, and I bold-faced this for a little bit of color for the flowers. Flowers with no smell. Okay, flowers with no smell do not have Keduchat Feed, but flowers with smell, we tend to be stringent. And we're machmir unless they're just meant for beauty. Meaning, if they're meant for beauty, even though they have some smell, meaning meant to visual beauty, then we could be lenient as well. Okay, let's go to the next. Let's give an example here of what happens with an etrog. So we've spoken about vegetables and fruit and the difference between them, and now we're going to see how this plays out a little bit. The curious case of the etrog. Now we have two contradictory texts. One text here in Masechet Kiddushin Daf Gimel Amud Aleph suggests that an etrog is actually a vegetable. Now I should ask you: is an etrog a vegetable or a fruit? Can somebody tell me? Vegetable or fruit? Anybody? Vegetable or fruit? This is not a tough question. Vegetable or fruit? Anybody? Okay, so I guess you already know the sugya. You already know the machloket here that we have between two different Tanaitic sources. On the one hand, Kiddushin Daf Gimel Amud Aleph tells us that the etrog ki yerek. An etrog is like a vegetable. My yerek darko ligadel al kol ma'im uvishat likitam isuro. A vetrog darko ligadel al kol ma'im uvishat likitam isuro. Listen, an etrog is like a vegetable. That means, let's just think about this. Let's think this through for a second. If an etrog is picked on Som Gedalia, 3 days after Rosh Hashanah, this coming year, and then I purchase that etrog for my Daled Minim, that means that I have to deal with Keduchat Feed with that etrog. Okay, and we'll see what that means, all the different things you have to go through. Whereas if it's considered a fruit, then even though I'm using it in the Shemitah year, okay, during Sukkot, it clearly reached its third, it's a third of its growth in the previous year, during the 6th year. Okay, so then it doesn't have Keduchat Feed. Okay, the Rambam, we tend to follow the Rambam. Most Rishonim disagree with the Rambam and they say, listen, an etrog is a fruit body, but the Rambam suggests that it's actually a vegetable. Okay, practically we try to be machmir in both directions with regards to an etrog. Now, so it's a curious case of the etrog, to be a fruit or to not be a fruit. And I just want to share with you, and this is good, very good halacha l'maaseh. This was sent out by Rav Ishon recently, by the Rabbanut Harashit Motza Datit of Ra'anana, and with a little something telling us a little bit about etrogim and the Daled Minim. Okay, now that we have some key tools, we could understand this more fully. So we're going to buy Bezrat Hashem. We're going to buy our Daled Minim. We're going to shake the lulav, perform this beautiful mitzvah. And but the question is, what do we need to be concerned about with regard to Keduchat Feed? Etrogim. Let's start with etrogim. Etrogim shenil ketuli lifnei Rosh Hashanah tafshin peibet ein bahen Keduchat Feed umutar lemochram v'liknotam keragil. Etrogim, which are bought, that are picked before Rosh Hashanah, they do not have Keduchat Feed. You can sell them in normal fashion. You can do whatever you want with them. However, etrogim shenil ketul la'achar Rosh Hashanah. No heget bahem Keduchat Feed l'chumra. But if they're picked after Keduchat Feed, so this is the shita of the Rambam, who says that we treat etrogim like vegetables, and you go by the stage when you pick it, and if it's picked after Rosh Hashanah. Therefore, it has Keduchat Feed. You need to sell it in a particular way. Okay, how are you going to sell it? Okay, we didn't get into this in detail, but I just wanted to give you this understand here. Number one is you use the system of Otzar Beit Din, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Number two is Behavla'ah. It means you absorb the cost of the etrog with something else. Like you buy the lulav, okay, and I'm purchasing a lulav, I'm purchasing an aravot and hadassim, and as part of that, there's also an etrog, which is given as a, here, take the etrog for free type thing. Or karagil b'istamech al heter mechira, or you rely on heter mechira if you're talking about something that heter mechira applies to. We're going to talk about those concepts. But the point is, again, you're not allowed to sell Keduchat Feed. So if the etrog is treated like a vegetable and it's picked after Aleph Rosh Hashanah, Aleph Tishrei, it's going to have Keduchat Feed. So you have to figure out how you're selling it, okay, and how you're purchasing it. So this is just a very good example of that. And I imagine that whatever etrogim we purchase this year will have some proof of this is on a heter mechira field or when it was picked or et cetera, et cetera. But Sukkot is so close to the beginning of the year. Imagine most etrogim will have been picked beforehand. Now, what about lulavim and hadassim? Now, this we've also studied. Ein bahem Keduchat Feed Sukkot Tavshin Pei Bet. Afim niktefu bishnat Shemitah. Heyot sheikar gdulam haya bishnat hashishim mutar lemochram keragil likrat Sukkot Tavshin Pei Bet. So lulavim and hadassim do not have Keduchat Feed in this year in Tavshin Pei Bet, but they will have. He suggests that they will have in the future year. Okay, let's go to the next thing. Aravot. So aravot are treated just like branches, but lulavim and hadassim, which come from trees that have fruit from them, so those we assume, it seems like Rav Yishon is posking, they have some form of kedusha, but this is going to be a problem, not this year, but it will be a problem next year. Okay, and what about, in general, we said you can't prune your trees. Can you cut things for the Daled Minim? The answer is yes, you can. So it's not a problem to cut things specifically for this mitzvah. That's not about pruning for the sake of improving your trees. That is just about using it for another mitzvah. Okay, good. Now, so we've spoken a little bit about Keduchat Feed, what you can and cannot do with it. Let's do a little bit more. Because when it comes to Keduchat Feed, again, you took some oranges from your garden, you took apples, and they grew in the Shemitah year. They've gone through a third of their stage of growth during the Shemitah year, and they have Keduchat Feed. Now, there's a principle, and this is a very important principle, that you may use Keduchat Feed le'ochla v'lo lehefsed. You can use it to eat, but not to waste. You may not waste Keduchat Feed. No wasting, okay? You know how parents want their kids to always eat everything on their plate? That applies during Shnat HaShemitah. So I'm running through this, okay? There's more to analyze here, but these are just a list of the main laws. Number one, you should try to finish all the food that you can. You have a salad with cut up apples, you have to try to finish it. Try to finish it and consume it, okay? Now, what do you do with the remains? You have remains, okay? You have apple peels, and you have, apple, not rind. You have the apple peel, and you have orange peels, and you have an avocado pit, and you have banana peels. What do you do with all this stuff? What do I do with the vegetable soup that has Keduchat Feed that's mixed together with everything else? And what do I do with a salad? So there's something called, this is like a really key thing, and that is that you have to, you cannot destroy the Keduchat Feed. You have to get rid of it. So you can't just throw it in the garbage. It has holiness. You can't throw it in the garbage. Just like when we take Truma to Masra, we don't just throw Truma into the garbage. We should put it into a bag. We try to, treat it more respectfully. So what's recommended, there are two different options here. It's recommended to get a pot, put a little bin, and put Keduchat Feed on it. Okay? This is like a halachic version of a compost. Okay? And so you put Keduchat Feed on it, and you finish your meal. You put all the food, the remains, into a bag. You put that bag into the Keduchat Feed, you close it up, and you put it in the Keduchat Feed bin. You're not throwing it out, it's in the bin. Okay? And then for the next meal, you do the next thing after, 5-day period, 7-day period, when whatever is in the bag, rots and is no longer edible and is no longer considered food, then you can dispose of it. Okay. And but a few things to be aware of when it comes to salads. Yeah, you could put other things in the Keduchat Feed, even if it's not actually, let's say a fruit which doesn't have Keduchat Feed. You could put that in too with everything else. Soup, we assume even the liquid has Keduchat Feed. Okay, another option for soup, by the way, is actually to leave, if you're not going to eat the soup and you have to get rid of it, you actually could leave it out the whole night. It will then sort of decompose, and then you could throw it out. Peels can be thrown into regular garbage, but like a peel of a banana. But if you're peeling a carrot, okay, that's like edible. So a carrot should probably go into a Keduchat Feed bin, and pits that have some food on them. So some are machmir to throw this in the bin as well. Okay. Now the other option, if you feel that it's going to be too hard for you to do this Keduchat Feed bin, is whatever remains of the meal you take, you put into a bag and you put it right into the bin. It's the less good option, but it's fine. But it's better to have this Keduchat Feed. You can put a little bin on your countertop and put the things in, and this reminds you about the holiness of the food. What about the remains and what's sticking to the pot? That you could wash out, not a problem. You could leave food for animals if it has already been eaten by people, meaning if there are remains from your own meal, you could put it out and the animals will come and eat it. You can't feed animals, but if they come and eat it, so be it. So they eat it. Compost. Can you actually make a compost? You can, but you need to separate between different layers. Yesterday's meal versus today's meal. You could put that on a piece of paper. And you can't use the compost in this year because it has Keduchat Feed. You have to wait till the Shemitah year is over. And also other prohibitions with regards to Keduchat Feed. Cooking. You shouldn't be using it in an abnormal way. So cooking, you can cook any produce that would normally be cooked. What does that mean? Like, don't cook a watermelon. If you have Keduchat Feed watermelon, you shouldn't cook it because we don't cook watermelon. So you have to treat the food as it would normally be treated. Juicing, you can juice any fruit that you normally would juice with. That's considered normal usage. What about making shakes? Risuk. So today we make shakes out of all different types of veggies and fruits. You can make any shake that you like with vegetables or with fruit, whatever it is. So these are some of the prohibitions. Keduchat Feed really, plays out in 3 different ways. Number 1, you cannot sell it and make a profit off of it. Number 2, the remains, the leftovers, you have to treat with Kedusha. Number 3, you can't cook in an abnormal way. Number 4, I'll just give you another example that comes up. Rav Kook paskins that one is not allowed to use the wine from let's say you have a bottle of wine that's Keduchat Feed. It was produced from grapes that have Keduchat Feed. Can I pour out that wine and then extinguish the candle from Havdalah with that wine? And the answer is no, because that's considered destroying. That's considered wasting the wine. One should not do that during the Shemitah year when you have Keduchat Feed wine. Again, it's only if you have Keduchat Feed wine. Okay, I'm going to pause for a second. Any questions at this point in time? Questions, comments, thoughts? Okay. Let's do a little bit more for this evening, and we will call it the night. Okay. Now we get to a huge discussion about what will we eat in the 7th year. Now, options during Shemitah. This is an area that's both complex and riveting and exciting and controversial and debatable, and there's so much history about this issue. But basically, we're going to want to have fruits and vegetables this coming year. Now, I don't know about you, but in my garden, we have a little clementine tree, and we have a tapuz sini. Okay, I don't even know what actually the truth is. We have issues with them with orla, which is another topic. But I want to have tomatoes and cucumbers, and I want to have carrots, and I want to have all these things. How am I going to? How do you buy this stuff? How are you going to, if everyone is stopping to produce, if all the fields are closing down in the Shemitah year, how are we going to have produce for 9 million people who eat, salat Israeli 3 times a day for a whole year? How is there going to be enough cucumbers and tomatoes, during this period of time? Everyone's sitting and learning in the Beit Midrash during the Shemitah year, and no farmers are doing any work, so we're not going to have any food. So Manuchal B'Shana HaShvi'it. So this is a major challenge, and this is an issue that was really a big debate, and it's still a debate today, dating back to the Chalutzim, those who came in the late 19th century, and they had to figure out solutions when they built Rishon LeZion, and they built Petach Tikva, and they built Gedera, all these early Yeshuvim. So they had to figure out, what were they going to do in Shnat HaShemitah? So this is a very big discussion, and there's a lot of history here. And I've gone through some of this history during Shiurim on Shabbat afternoon. I just see there's a question here. The Torah says pre-8. Okay, it seems like that's from something else. Okay, so options during Shemitah. What is a person supposed to do during Shnat HaShemitah? A second, I just okay. If you don't mind.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, just muting your device. Sorry. So what do we do? So here we get to a very big discussion. So let's talk about the different options here. Let's look at option number 3 is an option 4 and option 5. These are all like really good options. Option number 3 is that we use hydroponics, or that we grow things in greenhouses that are not connected to the ground in any way. They're elevated, they're in covered domains, and therefore they're not connected to the land, and they don't have Keduchat Feed, and therefore they could be sold in stores. You don't need to worry about dealing with the holiness and the remains and the leftovers. That's matzah. It's called matzah menutak. Now, Yivul Shishit is also a very good solution. If we grow more in the 6th year, we'll have more for the 7th year. Now, that might work for some fruit, but vegetables, you're going to grow cucumbers 8 months in advance, that doesn't work. Option number 2 is to say, hey, wait a second, why don't we just purchase from our neighbors next door? Let's purchase from the Arabs. Let's purchase from the Palestinians. Let's purchase from producers who are not Jews. And if it's coming from land that's not it's not owned by Jews, it doesn't have Keduchat Feed. Okay, and therefore you don't need to worry about again, the leftovers and the selling and all these things. So that's called Yivul Nochri. Okay. There are those who don't feel comfortable eating Yivul Nochri because they want to support specifically Jewish farmers. They want to support Jewish produce. So Yivul Nochri is a complicated issue. I will tell you that the Haredi community generally eats Yivul Nochri. Okay, they generally eat Yivul Nochri. Shuk Mahadran, which is here in Ra'anana and Rehov Achuza, is they have Yivul Nochri. That's what they do. Okay, that's sort of the Haredi option. I don't want to say it's the Mahadran option; it's the Haredi option. And then you have now number 6 is to bring to export to import. Okay. So in general, Israel does import things. So Yivul Nochri, Haredim go with number 2 and number 6. Now, a heter mechira is something that was innovated, in fact, by a Sephardi rabbi in I think it was 18th century in Hebron, and the Sephardim were generally supportive of this, and it was picked up in the 19th century by Rav Elchanan Spector, and really supported fiercely by Rav Kook and students of Rav Kook. And heter mechira and the Rabbanut for generations, followed heter mechira. Now it's a little bit different, but they generally do. And heter mechira means that we sell the land to non-Jews. We sell Jewish farming land to non-Jews, and then the land is now owned by non-Jews. And then we assume that the land that's owned by non-Jews does not have Keduchat Feed. There's no Keduchat Feed, okay? Which is, as we saw that earlier, machloket between the Beit Yosef and the Mabit, okay? And so that's slightly different machloket, in fact, but it's connected to that machloket. And the Beit Yosef, Rav Yosef Karo Paskin, that if you do a heter mechira, if you sell the land owned by non-Jews does not have Keduchat Feed, okay? And so this is the opinion of the Rav Yosef Karo. And heter mechira meant that you sell the land, and then either Jews or non-Jews are working the land. According to Rav Kook's version, Jews really shouldn't work the land. Sell the land and have non-Jews working the land. The reality in practice is that many Jews sell their farms but they still work the land. They now work as workers, contractors on the land. Okay. Now the upside of heter mechira back in the day, 100 years ago, was that this enabled Jewish settlements to make it through very tough times. And it's not clear that the Jewish settlements here in Israel would have survived without relying on heter mechira. But as you can imagine, it's a sort of form of, getting around the issue of Shemitah. Now, I will tell you practically that all of the supermarkets in Ranana, all the big chains will all have heter mechira food. This is what 95% of Jews do, or not 95, 80% of Jews throughout the country are doing. They're eating heter mechira. You don't need to worry about Keduchat Feed. You don't need to deal with the leftovers. There's no issue with selling it. Okay, this is heter mechira. And again, those within the Rav Kook camp and others, Rabbi Yosef also supports heter mechira. They feel that it's more important to buy heter mechira produce than it is to support non-Jewish produce in the land of Israel. And one of the big discussions has to do with a principle called lo tachonem, which means that you're not allowed to give non-Jews a holding in the land. And so some say, well, if you sell the land to non-Jews, heter mechira is violating lo tachonem. But on the other hand, I saw Rav Ramban paskin that in a deeper way, dafka buying from Jews, buying heter mechira is supporting Jewish ownership of the land and the Jewish achzaka of the land. So that's dafka the opposite of violating lo tachonem. It's very much in the spirit of lo tachonem. So this is a very big controversial issue. This plays out. I mean, this is we have here Yivul Nachri versus heter mechira. It's like Ali versus Fraser. Okay, this is a huge debate about what to do. In our communities, we generally support heter mechira and we eat heter mechira. But let me qualify that. But there are better options. The ideal option is matzah menutak and Yivul shishit. Or number 5 is when you take aravad dromit, you take things that are produced from south of a particular area in the Negev, and coupled with heter mechira. So those two together is also an ideal option. But then we get to number 7. And number 7 is called otzar beitin. I promised you we would speak a little bit about otzar beitin. Okay, so otzar beitin is right here. Just one slide that I skipped is, again, this is the machlok that I wanted to reference. Does produce from heter mechira or yivul nachri, things owned by non-Jews, have Keduchat Feed? So again, the Mabit says it does, okay, whereas Rav Yosef Kar says it does not. The minhag Yerushalayim is to follow the Beit Yosef. It's not just Yerushalayim, all of Eretz Yisrael. And the minhag of Bnei Brak is to follow the Mabit. So in Bnei Brak, if you have heter mechira food, they'll still treat it with Keduchat Feed. But generally, throughout Eretz Yisrael, we don't treat it with Keduchat Feed. Now, what is otzar beitin? Otzar beitin is an ideal option. No doubt, it's an ideal option. And what otzar beitin entails is actually something that's quoted earlier on in the Tosefta, Masechet Shvi'it Perek Chet, Halacha Aleph. And what otzar beitin means is that I, as a person, let's say I'm a landowner and I have fruit and I have vegetables. Okay, I am not allowed to, sell my produce, but beitin can, basically take hold of all of the produce, of all the different fields. So it's not me, I'm not taking hold of the produce. Beitin collects the produce, they organize the collection of all the produce, and then they create a quasi-market and they sell the produce. Okay, again, it's not me personally, it's not me as an individual landowner, it's the Beitin who's organizing this. And so let's say I want to go buy the fruit. So I'm going to buy the fruit from otzar beitin. What am I paying for? I mean, you can't have someone pay for the fruit itself. What are you paying for? You're paying for the labor that it was entailed in collecting the fruit. Because again, you can't work the land. I can't plow. I can't seed. I can't gather industrially or harvest industrially. So by the way, number 1, otzar beitin only applies to fruit because fruit grows on its own automatically. It doesn't apply to vegetables. It can't produce anything. But whatever is growing already, okay, the fruit that's grown already, beitin can collect and create a quasi-market out of it. And they can charge money for it, and they're charging for they're just charging for the labor. Okay, and so the challenge with otzar beitin is that beitin needs a lot of money to do this at the outset. And you don't want to have this normal transaction where I buy produce and I give the money for it. So the way Otzar Beitin works is that you actually buy it up front. You put in money to the Otzar up front, and we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail now. And then you get your fruit at a later point. Now, and this is the last slide. Let's go to this. Let's go to this website. Okay, this is Torahland, and Torahland runs what's called Otzar Haaretz. Okay, okay, so Otzar Haaretz is 1 second. Otzar Haaretz is, and this is an amazing website, by the way. Okay, so I definitely recommend you look at this website. It's called Torahland. Okay, the Hebrew version's even more extensive. Okay, but there's, they have videos, they have discussions here. I'll just go back to the English site. See, notice the English site is American. Okay, to all you Brits and South Africans, it's specifically American. Okay, so let's look at this here. Otzar Haaretz. Okay. Okay, so you have here, first of all, many different, articles about Otzar Beitin and about, now what they do is they have something called Otzar Haaretz. Okay, let's go to this. Otzar Haaretz 5782. Okay, what do? Otzar Haaretz is a unique program that makes it possible to observe the Shemitah year in the most mehudar fashion, while supporting Israeli agriculture. This initiative began 21 years ago under the guidance of leading rabbis in the past, Rav Shapir, Rav Mordechai Eliyahu, Rav Shaul Yisraeli, and contemporary rabbis Rav Chaim Druckmann, Rav Yaakov Rial, Rav Dov Lior, etc. Our goals: strengthening Israeli agriculture, connecting the public at large to Shemitah observance, selling high-quality Mahadran produce, bringing produce with Keduchat Feed to every Jewish household in Israel, and advancing proper Shemitah observance in the land of Israel. So what they're encouraging people to do is not to avoid Shemitah, but to embrace it head on, to buy Keduchat Feed. Otzar Beitin, and this is the key point that I didn't make beforehand. Otzar Beitin produce has Keduchat Feed. When you buy Otzar Beitin, you're buying Keduchat Feed. Whereas Heter Mechira does not have Keduchat Feed. And Yivul Nachui does not have Keduchat Feed. Now, what do you need to do? Number one, you purchase coupons ahead of time for the entire year at the amount of your choice. And you receive these coupons on a monthly basis. And you use the coupons at a Otzar Haaretz sale points. Okay, you see a short clip on Otzar Haaretz here. We'll look at that later. Link to the list of Otzar Haaretz stores, updated every 2 weeks. Let's see. Now, I did speak to Aryeh Friedman about this. I don't think right now there are any stores in Ra'anana that have Otzar Haaretz. Let's look. Let's look if there's anything in. There's in Safon. Okay, lots in Yerushalayim. Okay, Merkaz Shomron. Is there anything here that is that has? Okay, you have Pleasant Peduel and Ater Kedumim, but right now nothing in Ra'anana. Okay, so this is going to complicate things a little bit, because how are we going to get our produce? How are we going to get our Keduchat Shvi'it if there are no stores nearby? So, Aryeh Friedman suggested that it's possible something will open. From what I understand, store on Chafetz Chaim had Otzar Beitin produce in the past, and it does not. He wasn't sure whether it was going to open up this year or not. Okay, but this is you see why some of the challenges here. But let's go back to this now. So, which types of fruits and vegetables are available? So, Otzar Beitin, fruits and vegetables sown before Shemitah that grow. Okay, so etc. Who supports Otzar Beitin that we spoke about? Why you should become a member? Okay, how does membership work? You read through this. You're paying ahead of time because it's not a normal transaction. Okay, what does the Beitin include? Okay, these are the people who are sitting on the Beitin. Okay. Will produce be delivered throughout the country? This is big. In the preparations of the sales point in more areas, we're working with Bikurei Hasadeh Darom, a major company that distributes fresh produce all over the country. In this way, Otzar Haaretz trucks will reach most parts of the country with the goal of supplying produce to as many households as possible. Last week, we opened sales points to all over Israel. We are sure that we will successfully do the same this year as well. We hope to reach 130 to 200 stores all over the country. In the end, it is also up to you. When we contact grocery store owners to serve as our distributors in their store, they inquire about our demand for Otzar Haaretz produce in their area. Meaning, we need to go out and tell stores, hey, can you please get Otzar Haaretz produce? And this way you could use your point in a place near you. So the Shemitah year, for the very time, we're working with 3 companies that provide home delivery services for Otzar Haaretz produce, Berkat Adama, Tarshish Arabai, and Noya Sadeh. Unfortunately, all 3 websites are in Hebrew only. Okay, so there are these places that also do home deliveries, and you could use them. Okay, so and this tells you the different areas that they reach in Yerushalayim, etc. Noya Sadeh is a produce substandard or higher quality. What are the prices? Sometimes it tends to be a little bit higher, in fact. But again, this is we'll just read this. Why not let the land lie fallow? Letting the land lie fallow is a solution for a single farmer, but an entire country cannot survive when its land lies fallow. Not working the land at all until significantly increasing importation or purchasing produce from non-Jews. There's the Arabs, those and controllers of Gaza. As many are hostile to Israel, and this undermines Jewish Israeli agriculture. These are less desirable options according to the rabbis of Otzar Haaretz. So there is if you will, a political dimension here, no doubt. And but Otzar Haaretz is definitely the ideal option. But again, it demands that a person is aware of the halachot of Keduchat Feed. They're not hard. It's not impossible. It takes a little bit more effort and consciousness and intention. But it means that we have the opportunity to eat Keduchat Shvi'it and to dispose of it and know how to use it properly if we're buying Otzar Haaretz. So if you ask me what I recommend, definitely ideal to try to purchase Otzar Haaretz. Try to sign up and do it, and do the best that you can with it. And then you go through the list. Try to buy matzah menutak and yivul shishit. All those options are great options. And if not, we rely on heter mechira as our backup, which I think is a better option than yivul nochri. In general, halacha l'maaseh is in our communities where we believe heter mechira has force. So if you're eating at someone's home who has a different, custom menu, you could eat there. Let's say you only eat Otzar Haaretz, but they eat heter mechira, you can eat by them. It's not a problem. Okay, so this is, these are some of the halachot related to Shemitah in the kitchen and the marketplace. I hope that this has been instructive and helpful. If you have any questions, please reach out. And Bezrat Hashem, we should be zocha to, Am Yisrael should be zocha to observe a proper Shemitah that, in peace and in comfort, v'shalom v'shalva, this coming Shemitah year and for many future Shemitah years, and it should be a Shnat Bracha for Medinat Yisrael this coming year. So great to learn with you, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And so Erev Tov L'Kulam, and we'll continue our studies of Hilchot Shemitah over the next few weeks and months. Kol Tov.